So point 5 says those who exploit the logistical support all the way to maturity become qualified to receive more grace, super grace. And if you recall, super grace is a term my pastor coined back in 1972, 73, if I'm not mistaken. And he got this from James chapter 4, verse 6, which is greater grace. The concept is also in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 14. And here we have it right here in our passage. Chapter 4, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 15, the increase of grace. The increase of grace is also mentioned sarcastically or rhetorically in Romans chapter 6, but it's used in a wrong way. Paul puts himself in the place and the position of the skeptic who says, so what, should we continue sinning so that grace can increase? And when Paul says no, so he refutes that rhetorical question. And but that is not in view here. Here it is talking about the increase of grace and post-salvation. Okay, point 7. Point 6. This increase of grace is not realized through human works, but by the exploitation of God's grace provision. This increase of grace is not realized through human works, but by the exploitation of God's grace provision. Point 7. The increase of grace inevitably causes the recognition of it. So in other words, you cannot recognize grace unless you have Bible doctrine. Bible doctrine helps you, gives you the capacity to recognize grace. How many times have you met believers who have everything? Everything. God has provided everything for them. Yet they are ungrateful. They cannot recognize God's grace. In fact, they have no capacity to be grateful about that grace provision. That is because of lack of Bible doctrine. Thanksgiving and the recognition of grace, it's antithetical to arrogance. With arrogance, you are too self-centered. You cannot recognize these great things that God has given you. Okay. Point 7 again, the increase of grace inevitably causes the recognition of it. Assuming that you have Bible doctrine, right? In the soul. Point 8, the recognition of this grace increase incidentally causes the increase of thanksgiving. Well, that's what Thanksgiving is. You recognize grace and then you give grace back to God. You give him back what he gives you. And that is gratitude, thanksgiving. Okay. Point 9. Point 9 is God is glorified whenever he blesses a believer in the devil's world, as per our passage, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 15. Eis tein doxan tu teu. Eis plus the accusative of doxa is directional to the glory, resulting in the glory of God. So God is already glory, but when it comes to you, to your post-salvation spiritual life, all the way to maturity, now you have reached the point of glorifying him. Also known as Gate 8, also known as glorifying Christ in who indwells you, glorifying Christ in the body. Point 10. Only the super grace believer has real gratitude, thanksgiving towards God. For the super grace blessings increases gratitude, thanksgiving. Point 11. The reversionistic believer has no gratitude, for he is too arrogant. And as I mentioned, arrogance and gratitude are antithetical. The gauge of your gratitude expresses your spiritual maturity, your spiritual advance. If you are spiritual advance, the gratitude is one of those gauges that lets people know how far you've advanced, how much doctrine you have. Point 12. It requires doctrine resident in the soul in order to recognize grace. Point 13 says, without doctrine in the soul, the recognition of grace is very minimal. In fact, if you're arrogant, you cannot recognize grace. And you could say, oh, God's grace, and it's because God's grace, and you could do that all over and over again. But your thinking is not on par with your words. Point 14. The mature believer, however, has maximum doctrine in the soul, which not only recognizes logistical grace, but also exploits it, or has exploited it, to increase more grace. The mature believer, however, has maximum doctrine in the soul, which not only recognizes logistical grace, but also has exploited it to increase more grace. (15) The recognition of more grace, super grace, in turn results in more thanksgiving. 16. This thanksgiving to God in the devil's world glorifies God. 17. To demonstrate that one can be extremely happy and thankful apart from anything the devil has to offer glorifies God. Again, Satan is always offering things. In fact, he's always imitating God. Just as God blesses and promotes, Satan also wants to bless and promote. He blesses his people who are in the cosmic system. And as we just mentioned in the beginning of chapter 4, those who deny the gospel as unbelievers, if they have outright denied the gospel, Satan comes and blinds them in cosmic one. In other words, he promotes them in cosmic one activity, arrogance. So he gives you. And obviously, there are gradients. There are different levels of influence in the cosmic system. For those who remain too long in the cosmic system, they are going to be influenced a lot more by evil in the cosmic system. For those who remain less and get out immediately, obviously they are less influenced in the cosmic system. There is such a thing, such a difference as sinning and being influenced by sin. There is such a thing as being an evil or causing an evil action, making an evil action, and being influenced by evil. So you could see that there are different degrees of influence. Those who remain too long in the cosmic system are more influenced by evil and sin. Those who remain less time in the cosmic system are less influenced by evil and sin. Oh, you're asking me what's the difference between sin and evil? Well, evil involves, sin is just one of those simple sins that, oops, I messed up, oops, I did this, I did that, you 1 John 1:9 right away. That doesn't mean you're influenced by that sin. That doesn't mean you are evil. But when the moment that you add arrogance to that sin, you'd make it into a system of evil. What is the determining factor whether something becomes evil or not? Add arrogance to it. Add that self-importance. Add that pomposity. Immediately you get that arrogance, you add it to the sin, and you turn that sin into an evil system of evil. A system of a lifestyle, a system of replacing God. So we were in point 17. To demonstrate that one can be extremely happy and thankful apart from anything the devil has to offer glorifies God. That was point 17. Yeah. It is God. Point 18. It is God's will for the believer to have his incomparable happiness. And for our last point, in case you're already complaining inside of your soul, point 19 says, arrogance, evil, reversionism, or anything Satan's cosmic system has to offer is the antithesis of this super grace and its resultant gratitude and happiness. Again, arrogance, evil, reversionism, or anything Satan's cosmic system has to offer is the antithesis of this super grace and its resultant gratitude and happiness. Now, I believe we're safe to move on from this verse now. We can go on to the next one. Remember, all these things are for you. For you see, all these things are because of y'all, so that grace, having increased through the greater numbers of people reaching super grace among the Corinthians, may cause thanksgiving to increase, resulting in the glory of God. Oh, booyah. Okay, verse 16 now says this, where we are. Therefore we do not lose heart. Again, the same verb we saw in chapter 4, verse 1. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. this in the Greek is a little bit confusing. It's going to take me much more time to explain the Greek than explain the concept. But we have this. So in verse 16, and let me look at my notes. I'm not going to go. Okay. So therefore, we have this inferential conjunction, dio. We've already encountered this several times in our passage. In fact, we saw it in our documentation of David's Psalm 116, verse 10. Here we are. I communicate, I believed, therefore, dio, right here, dio. Over here, it's in the capital delta, capital, dio. It is composed of a prepositional phrase, the plus the neuter of the article of the articles. And so this is a crassus, and so it becomes dio. You put them together, it becomes dio. And so yes, it could be translated for this reason, because of this, very literal. Now I'm going to say for this reason, for this reason, for this reason what? For the reason that all this is for the Corinthians. The dying provides the environment, the dying of Jesus provides the environment so that the lamp can shine forth the life of Jesus. So this is a different purpose for suffering. And inevitably, suffering every day gives the temptation, leads you to the temptation of wondering, is this worth it? Should I continue going? And this is the reason why you have to continue learning doctrine every day and apply it. And it leads you to that situation where you're like, is this worth it? Okay, I already went through this yesterday. I went through that yesterday. The same thing over and over again. These unbelievers or these cosmic believers do not learn. They're still going at it. They're insane, and it is insanity. They're not okay. If every day they wake up motivated by seeing what type of harm they can do on you, they're not okay. And the next day you wake up and you go in and you see the same people with the same mental attitude, full of bitterness, full of anger, evil. And they just do not seem to give up, and they suffer, and God keeps punishing them, and they still do not learn. They do not want to repent. And so you wonder, is this worth it? What is this for? There's still people around looking at you, however, and you might not know who they are at that moment. You might not know who's on your side. You might not know who's covertly rooting for you. Go, 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 go. And they're looking at you, admiring you. And so you just continue going. Is this a legitimate motivation? Well, it appears from our passage that it is a legitimate motivation. For you see, these things are because of y'all, Paul tells the Corinthians. And so much as that death shows itself operative in us, while life shows itself operative in y'all, it appears that this is a legitimate motivation, also known as impersonal love for mankind, impersonal love for whoever might be watching you. Also occupation with Christ. So you see that you need some great motivation in life, and this motivation comes from doctrine. The more you know, the more you experience things in life, the more you know about the sin nature, the more prone, the more susceptible to be unhappy you are. A very intelligent person is more probable to become unhappy because he knows a little bit too much. He knows a little bit too much about reality, about the motivations of people, or fake motivations, ulterior motives, and so he tends to be cynical and less trusting, less motivated by people, and so he tends to be a little bit more susceptible towards unhappiness. As a result, you need a great motivator to counter that disenchantment or disillusionment, so to speak, or that despondency, discouragement, whatever one of those negative emotions, negative mental attitudes that you might encounter. You need a great motivator to counter that, and that great motivator is the personal love for God the Father, problem-solving device number 7. And occupation with Christ, problem-solving device number 10. And here, in personal love towards all mankind, problem-solving device number 8, specifically towards the Corinthians. For these things, all these things are because of you. And so that's why he concludes, therefore we do not become despondent. We have the present active indicative of eg kakeo, ekakumen, with a strong negative. This strong negative denies the reality that they become discouraged or despondent. They do not. He says not. Therefore, for this reason, we do not become despondent. The same word that you found in chapter 4, verse 1. Here's this the therefore, since we have this ministry, just as we have been given mercy, we do not become discouraged, despondent. We're going to translate it just that. We're going to use both words. The difference between discouragement and despondency is discouragement is more vacillating. It comes here, it comes there, you just feel it as a temptation. Despondency is fixed in. You allow the discouragement to reside inside of your soul. You give into it with the result that you become despondent, fixed in discouragement. And I mentioned the difference between men and women many times. Our mental attitudes, our emotions tend to be much more fixed in. For the woman, it's much more vacillating. She can snap out of it through a little crying a She can receive a few compliments here and there before she goes to work, and gets a little heads someone looking at her, in the right way, and she becomes motivated to go into work, and she snaps out of it. For us, man, when we give into despondency, discouragement, or depression, or any negative insecurity, we are more fixed in. This is the reason, it becomes more fixed in. And this is the reason why men are not meant to be so petty, to be so full of mental attitude sins, to be so bitter and implacable and jealous. If you're a jealous man, you've had it. These things are more fixed in the man than they are in the woman. The woman goes into that, she goes into jealousy and she gets out. She logs into jealousy, she gets out. She goes in and she gets out. For a man, it's fixed in. You're into jealousy and you're a jealous ass. That's what you are. And this is the reason why you're not meant as a man to get into these types of mental attitude sins. No one is, by the way. It is just as much a sin for a man as it is for a woman to be in jealousy, bitterness, and all these mental attitude sins. But for man, it causes us much more harm. We degenerate ourselves much faster by getting into these mental attitude sins. This is the reason why you see men who are worse gossipers than women. Gossiping is a female attribute. I'm not even going to say lady, it's a female attribute. And why do men become much better at it? Because we're not meant to function like that. Our mental attitude sins are much more fixed in than the vacillating nature of those of the women. This is the reason why whenever you go and you see a sassy gay dude, that's why the reason why he controls all the women around him. That's the reason why he's more vindictive than the woman, more bitter than woman, more in competition than the women around him. Because us men, with our masculine soul, we are not meant to function in that way. Well, so much for the difference between the emotions of men and women, and the difference between discouragement and despondency. Both here, despondency and discouragement can be the interpretation for ekakumen. And this reads, for this reason, we do not become despondent. Let me go over the structure of this.